15.2%. That's the gross margin number that just sent a red flare across the U.S. housing market. It came from Lennar, America's second largest home builder, filed straight to the SEC on March 12th. 2 years ago, that same number was 21.8%. 1 year ago, 18.7%. Today, 15.2%. And it's the receipt behind why two of the most credible economists in housing just issued their biggest warnings yet. Mark Zandi at Moody's Analytics, the man who called the 2008 collapse before it happened, and Lawrence Yun at the National Association of Realtors, the most structurally bullish voice in American real estate for nearly 2 decades. In the last 10 months, both of them have effectively surrendered. Today, we're laying out the exact words Zandi used when he upgraded his housing warning from yellow flare to red flare. The 3-year pattern of Yun's forecast revisions that looks less like analysis and more like a credibility collapse. And the one piece of math on a $400,000 home that explains why this warning is different from every warning you've heard this cycle. Stick with me. Let's start with Zandi. On July 13, 2025, Mark Zandi posted a statement on X that made every serious housing analyst on Wall Street stop scrolling. The exact words, "I sent off a yellow flare on the housing market in a post a couple of weeks ago, but I now think a red flare is more appropriate." Read that again. The chief economist at Moody's Analytics escalated his own public warning by name on the record on a Sunday. The reason matters. Here's what he wrote next. Home sales are already uber depressed, but home builders providing rate buydowns had been propping sales up. They're giving up. It's simply too expensive. Builders are giving up. That's not editorializing. That's a direct quote from the chief economist at Moody's. And then came the line that smart analysts have been screenshotting for 10 months. Housing will thus soon be a full-blown headwind to broader economic growth. Zandi has a track record worth knowing. In 2006, a full year before the housing crash, he authored a Moody's report titled Housing at the Tipping Point, flagging more than 100 metros at risk of price decline. Every major economist at the time disagreed. By 2008, that report was required reading on Capitol Hill. So when this particular economist takes 8 months and upgrades his warning from yellow to red, the question isn't whether he's being dramatic. The question is what he's seeing in the data that hasn't shown up in the headlines yet. Here's what he's seeing. On March 12, 2026, Lennar filed its first quarter results with the SEC. Home building gross margin 15.2%. That number, sitting on a single line of an unglamorous 10Q filing, is the loudest signal in housing right now. Because 2 years earlier, that same margin was 21.8%. 1 year earlier, 18.7%. Now, it's 15.2%. That's a 660 basis point collapse in 24 months. Translated out of finance jargon, Lennar is making roughly 30% less profit on every single house it sells today than it was in 2024. And on the earnings call that day, the company didn't try to spin it. Lennar's leadership told analysts, direct quote, "We believe our Q1 margin of 15.2% should represent the low point for the year." Read that carefully. They're not saying margins will recover. They're saying 15.2 is the floor. They're guiding the rest of 2026 to print between 15 and 16%. For context, Lennar's Q1 2026 net earnings came in at $229 million, down from $519 million a year earlier. Cut in half. Pulte Group in the same quarter watched its gross margin slide from 27.5% to 24.4%. The National Association of Home Builders May 2026 Sentiment Index, 37. That's the 25th consecutive month below 50. 32% of builders cut their prices in May. 61% are offering buyer incentives. So when Zandi said builders are giving up, this is the receipt. He wasn't predicting. He was reading the filings. If you want this kind of analysis, pulled straight from the SEC filing and the NAR press releases, not somebody's hot take on social media, subscribe and hit the notification bell. The headlines and the filings are telling two different stories right now, and you want to be on the side that reads the filings. Now, to the second warning. Lawrence Yun has been the chief economist at the National Association of Realtors for nearly 2 decades. His job, structurally, is to be the most bullish voice in the room, which is what makes what happened in April so significant. On November 14, 2025, at NAR's annual conference in Houston, Yun forecast that existing home sales would jump 14% in 2026. 5 months later, on April 13th, 2026, NAR put out a revised forecast. New number, 4%. From 14 down to 4. That's a 71% cut to his own forecast in 150 days. Here's the part nobody at NAR wants you to look at. This isn't the first time he's done this. In late 2023, Yoon forecast that 2024 existing home sales would rise 13.5%. Actual result? Down 0.7%. The worst year for home sales since 1995. In November 2024, he forecast 2025 sales would rise 9%. Actual result? Roughly flat. Again, the lowest annual pace since 1995. And now 2026 opened at plus 14, walked down to plus 4, 3 straight years. 3 opening optimistic forecasts. 3 downward revisions. 3 landings at roughly 4 million existing home sales annualized. A level this country hasn't seen since the Clinton administration was campaigning for re-election. That's not a forecasting error. That's a pattern. When even the man whose job is to sell you the recovery cuts his own number by 71% in 150 days, you don't need a competing economist to tell you the recovery isn't coming on schedule. The signal is the source. So what does it actually mean when these 2 warnings land within months of each other? The 30-year fixed mortgage rate per Freddie Mac on June 11th, 6.52%. Existing home sales pace in May, 4.17 million annualized. New home sales in April, 622,000, down 11.3% year over year. Builder sentiment, 37. And Moody's Analytics' own machine learning recession indicator, 48.6% probability of recession within 12 months. As of March 25th, 2026, the baseline in a normal economy is 15 to 20%. We're sitting at nearly 3 times that. Every previous time that indicator crossed 50 in modern history, 2001, 2007, 2020, a recession followed. Here's where the bull rebuttal comes in. And we want to be honest with you about it. May 2026 existing home sales rose 3.2%. Pending sales have been up 3 months in a row. Mortgage purchase applications were up 7% week over week. So if you're watching the recovery crowd on other channels, you've heard them celebrate this. But wait, it gets worse. Because the recovery is happening at the wrong end. Sales are bouncing off a 30-year trough. 4.17 million is still below the long-run average. New home sales are down double digits year over year. Builder margins sit at cycle lows. And the median existing home sale price just hit an all-time record of $429,300 in May, meaning the affordability problem that started this whole crisis just got worse. Here's our take. And we'll say it on the record, the U.S. housing market is not going to crash in the way the doomers want it to. It's doing something far worse. It's breaking in slow motion. The volume is at recession levels. The builders are at recession margins. The forecasts are at recession revisions. And the prices refuse to fall. That's not stability. That's the most expensive paralysis in modern American real estate history. That's the take. Now we want yours. Drop a comment and tell us whether you think the bulls are right, the doomers are right, or whether the truth is what I just said, that this market is breaking sideways instead of crashing. And if this is the first video where someone has laid the Lennar filing next to the Zandi quote, next to the Yoon revision pattern in a way that connects the receipts, hit the like button so YouTube pushes it to more homeowners and buyers who deserve to see it. Let me give you the historical benchmark because this part matters. In 2006, a full year before the housing crash, Zandi published Housing at the Tipping Point. That report named over 100 metros at risk. Every major housing economist disagreed. NAR's own forecasts that year were still calling for continued strength. By the end of 2008, Zandi himself was testifying in front of the Senate Budget Committee in November and the House Budget Committee in January 2009. His Moody's recession indicator crossed 50 in 2007. Right before the worst housing collapse in modern American history. Here's the comparison that should stop you. The peak year for existing home sales in this country was 2005 at 7,072,000 units. The current annualized pace is 4.17 million. That's a 41% decline in transaction volume from peak. The U.S. population has grown by roughly 40 million people in the 20 years since. And yet, we're selling fewer homes today than we did when Bill Clinton was campaigning for re-election. The 2008 echo isn't in the prices. The prices are at record highs. The 2008 echo is in the volume. in the absolute number of Americans who have stopped buying and selling homes. That's what Zandi is reading. That's what Yoon is finally admitting. So who actually gets hurt here, and how? If you're a homeowner, the math is mixed. The average mortgaged borrower in America is sitting on roughly $295,000 in equity per Cotality, formerly CoreLogic. That number is down slightly year over year. Equity has stopped growing for the first time in a decade. If you locked a sub 4% mortgage between 2020 and 22, you're the structural winner of this market, and you shouldn't refinance at 6.52%. If you bought between 2023 and 25 at rates above 7%, a refi window may finally be opening for you. Barely. If you're a buyer, here's the math that matters most. A $400,000 home with 20% down, financed at the current 6.52% rate, gives you a principal and interest payment of roughly $2,025 a month. That same loan at the 3% rates of 2021 was $1,349 a month. That's a $676 monthly difference, roughly 50% more per month for the same exact house. That's the real reason home sales are at a 30-year low. And if you're a seller, this one is harder. About 1 in 5 listings is carrying a price cut. Individual investor and second home buyer share has fallen from 17% of all sales a year ago to 14% today. Lennar's own CEO openly cited what he called the pullback of institutional purchases. The marginal buyer who held this market up in 2023 and 24 is stepping back. If you're listing in the second half of 2026, you're competing for a shrinking pool of qualified buyers in a market where the chief economist of NAR just cut his own forecast by 71% in 150 days. Price accordingly. If this is the kind of analysis you want, direct from the filings, direct from the press releases, no spin and no hype, subscribe to this channel. We're not living through a crash. We're living through the most expensive paralysis in modern American real estate history. The volume is broken. The builders are bleeding. The forecasts are folding. And the prices are still printing record highs. That's the warning Zandi sent up in red. That's the forecast Yoon has finally surrendered. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so the next video lands in your feed the moment it drops, and watch this one next. Until next time, beautiful people.